Welcome to Ancestral Wisdom, where the wisdom of the past guides our future. Today, we'll be working with the rune Dagaz. Forgive my asymmetrical illustration there. I'm many things, but an artist is not one of them. But that's the shape that we're going to be treating today. So I want you to have it in mind. And the rune Dagaz, the word I want you to hear is day. And by day, we mean the day in which the sun is shining. But you can also, at the same time, think of it as the whole day and night cycle. So the night and the day together as one day. One day is 24 hours in that sense as well. So you could think of it as the 12-hour or so day in which it's light, but you can also think of the day and night cycle together as one 24-hour period. And we'll talk a little bit about the different significance of those two things, the symbolic significance of those two different ways of thinking about this particular rune. Now, what do I want you to see here? Well, you see a mirror image, right? Ideally. And what we're seeing here, what I want you to see, is two ideas, two things looking at each other in the mirror and then coming together in one moment. And in that one moment, the two cease to be and they're unified in a mystical way, right? So that's what I want you to envision in this. You could think of it as the sun and the moon and the evening star and the morning star, day and night itself, as two binary concepts that through contemplation can be unified, such as the idea of heads and tails being two sides of the same coin. They're more similar than they are different because they are part of the same coin. Um, Love and hate, right? There's a reason why both of those are symbolized through the color red. Both of those emotions, love and hatred, make our heart race. They fill our veins with blinding energy. They're two sides of the same coin. They're not exactly opposites unless in your conception of opposites you understand this connection between the two. So that's why Dagaz doesn't look like a sun or you know something that might indicate just the day with the light, just one side. So that's what I want you to see in the image. I have my trusty notes here, and so I'll make sure I hit every idea that I'd like to throughout this video. One image that comes to mind when treating this rune is not exactly a traditional pagan image, but it's interesting to me to treat ways in which the manifestation of the meaning behind the rune ends up showing itself in other mystical traditions. That can be interesting, even if we might not consider ourselves a part of those traditions or might even find faults with them. So one example that comes to mind is the symbol of the golden dawn. Now, if you're not familiar, it's the symbol of a sun with a cross rising. And the cross, of course, symbolizes a striving upwards, the Christian cross. It's structured so that the horizontal arm is above the center axis, and that draws the mind and the contemplation upwards. So the cross is a striving upwards, kind of like there are a few runes that have a similar connotation. Um, and the significance of that symbol, the dawn, the sun, and the cross rising, to me, in relation to this rune, is this. Dagaz symbolizes the mystical moment, the moment in which you're able to unite, to join parts of the mental or physical or spiritual sphere that you normally wouldn't be able to. And in that moment, there's an ecstasy. You often hear people saying, "Oh, I saw the light." It's a very Christian thing to say, but it applies to all mystical traditions. I saw the light. At that moment, everything joined, everything connected, and that connection of things created a state of mystical ecstasy in which you might even see light manifest itself due to the powerful forces that are being created inside of you by the joining of those things. And Dagaz is that very moment of mystical ecstasy. It's the seeing of the light and the curative powers of that moment. That moment can occur throughout your life in many different ways. It could be a moment of spiritual awakening. You've learned certain things and you've worked through ideas logically, and then all of the faculties within you that are responsible for being able to integrate your logic and experience along with your genetic knowledge perhaps and your intuition, all of those forces within you sift through the information, and then Eureka, spiritual awakening. Something reveals itself, which is a bright light in your world, cures you of something that you were suffering from, whether that something is a fallacy or a type of spiritual malaise or emotional distress, whatever it might be. But it's that moment of awakening, of spiritual awakening. It's also seen in inspiration. So if you're a musician and something connects in you, the emotions or feelings or ideas that you want to get across in the music and the way that the music is structured, those two things join at one particular moment. And at that moment where they join, you create an inspired piece of music that is your heart writ in sound. It's the joining of two things that are not, don't seem to be one, right? Musical structure and your heart, your soul. As soon as you join them, what do we call that? We call that inspiration. And you are inspired to create that song. The muses coming down, right? So artistic inspiration is associated with this moment of the joining of these seemingly opposite forces. And it's a way to go beyond language, because our logical faculties and our capacity for language is not sophisticated enough where we can just explain these types of things away. They're mystical states. It's an interesting paradox beyond language. So twilight and night and day become one at twilight. That's the symbol of these things we're talking about. The point in the middle is that twilight, and night and day are on the ends. I'll mention just one more thing in relation to this, and then I'll tie this rune into certain types of magical workings. Time. I recently listened to a talk that a philosopher named Alan Watts gave, and it made me think of something associated with this rune. And he basically said something similar to this. He said, the future does not exist and the past does not exist. They're concepts. They're things that we think about, right? The past, well, happened. It existed then, but it does not exist right now. The only thing that exists right now is the present. So you have the past and you have the future. They don't exist. Nothing exists except for this moment. Well, how do you make this moment count? What can you do to make this moment, imbue this moment with meaning that justifies existence? Be present. If all you're doing is thinking about the past, wallowing in the past, you're not experiencing the moment. If all you're doing is thinking about what is going to happen in the future, you're not experiencing the moment. That doesn't mean you can't take time to analyze the past so you don't make similar mistakes, or to dream about the future and to project ideas into the future. That way you have something to aim at. Doesn't mean you don't get to do that. It just means that while that can be part of life, that the majority of your life should be spent living. It should be spent having your mind rooted in the moment, in the present, so that you can experience life. And when you do that the right way, for example, when you do that the right way, you'll see that existence justifies itself. It's a moment of ecstasy almost, where you're lost in the waves of life. For example, if I'm playing with my one of my children, and while I'm playing with them, I'm thinking about, oh, this thing happened at work today and it's really bugging me, and oh, maybe I should have said this, or maybe I should have said that. That's not the time for that. If you really want to reflect on something, you can reflect on something, but give it its own time. Or if I'm playing with them and instead I'm off in the future, I'm like, well, what are the things that have to be done today? Well, these are my chores and I'm going to do this at this time. Yeah, again, there's time for that. Set aside time for the day to make a to-do list and to structure your day. But then when you're doing the things that are on that to-do list, do those things. And that's it. If you want to set aside time for your family, set aside that time for your family. And when you are in that time period, do nothing. Be present for your family. And you'll see that while the past exists and we can draw wisdom from it, and the future exists and we can project our aims towards it, that truly being present is a mystical experience all of its own. Use Dagaz to help inspire you, to help lead you to mystical moments of realization, to help you realize that your logic must integrate itself with your intuition in order for you to be able to find something that's greater than the two of them. And use it to remind yourself to be present. Or when you die, to misquote probably Thoreau, when you die, you'll find out that you never lived. Eurus Ansus raido cana, Yebo anjo hagalas, Naudis Isaiera, Iuas Berthroelgas, Soilotifas, Vercanoe womanas, Lagus in las dejas, O Sala.